In the beginning of this week's Parashat, Parashas BeHar, we talk about the mitzvah of Shemitta. And there's a question that typically comes up, Ma inyan Shemitta eitzel har Sinai, especially in this time of year in which we are counting weeks that resembles, into some degree, the idea of Shemitta, this idea of every seventh year being significant and being a time to rest the ground, the land of Israel. So too, every 7 days we have Shabbos. As the Sefer HaChinuch points out, there's a comparison between, an obvious comparison between the mitzvah of Shemitta and Shabbos. Just as on Shabbos we rest from doing malacha, on the seventh year we allow the land to rest from its continued work. And what's important to focus on, according to the Sefer HaChinuch, is not only our emunah in Hashem, that during the year in which we don't work, Chodesh Baruch Hu, Hashem will still provide. It's important and incumbent upon all of us, even in a year which is not Shemitta, right now is not a year of Shemitta. Ma'inyan Shemitta eitzel har Sinai allows us to focus on some of the elements of what Shemitta provides for us on a hashkafic level for our lives, and allows us, especially now as we're leading up to Shavuos, Kabbalas HaTorah, to think about what are those elements and how do they apply in our lives, even in a year that's not Shemitta. So we pointed out from the Sefer HaChinuch that it's important to think about the mitzvah of Shemitta and think about how we have emunah, particularly emunah, in times in which we don't have any guarantees. We're not kochi v'otzim yadi. We don't have the capacity, even in this situation, not only to not view the fruits of our labor as being only from ourselves. In a year of Shemitta, we don't even have the capacity to plant those fruits. There is no labor to some degree for us to attribute to our own success. And there it's forced upon us to think about how everything that we are given automatically comes from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And that's an obvious reminder right in front of us. Shabbos, to some degree, reminds us that as well. When we go into Shabbos, we're not working on Shabbos. 1/7 of our lives, we are not working, so to speak. Does that mean that we're not going to receive what we need in our lives because we're missing 1/7 of our work lives? No. Baruch Hashem, we've come to the ability to understand on a weekly basis that there's a work week and there's time to spend at home, time to spend with our families upon reflection on the previous week and planning for the upcoming week. And Shemitta and Shabbos both allow us to do that. But Davka, right now, as we're getting to Kabbalas HaTorah, right now as we're about to re-accept the Torah upon ourselves, if we're between this time of Pesach and Shavuos, in what the Ramban calls as a Chol HaMoed of sorts, between linking these two experiences of going from freedom for our own time, freedom from, again, any form of avdus to paro or other entities, and the freedom to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we have this opportunity to think about Shemitta. And so yes, there's this idea of Ma'inyan Shemitta eitzel har Sinai, because they're textually linked, but it's an important reminder that as we're going to Kabbalas HaTorah, as we're going into this stage in our lives, in this period of the year, to think about what the mitzvah does during the time of Shemitta and what learning about the mitzvah provides for us on our day-to-day experiences. So according to Sefer HaChinuch, it's about building our emunah in Hashem, that everything we have comes from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Rav Hirsch points out to us that the land is really only given to us. Rav Shimshon Hirsch says that the land is only really given to us upon the permission and allowance from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Like many things in this world, there are restrictions built out in the Torah specifically to allow us to ensure that we have certain framework to live within. Halacha guides us to interact with this world. It's not to totally separate from the world, but to interact with the world with guidance, with structure, and with limitations, allowing us to bring Kedusha into that space. Shavuos, Shemitta, the seventh year of the cycle of Shemitta, allowed us to remind us that the land, yes, while it was given hearts and son of Bnei Adam, says of Hirsch, yes, but only within the framework HaKadosh Baruch Hu has given us. And that's true about any interactions, any physical interaction we have in this world. There are limitations. It encompasses our married lives. It encompasses what we are allowed to eat and what we're not allowed to eat. There are limitations and guidelines that are given to us. And so yes, Ma'inyan Shemitta eitzel har Sinai, of course, as we're going into Kabbalas HaTorah, not only do we remind ourselves of emunah b'Hashem, which is a foundation of Kabbalas HaTorah, and it's a foundation in Shabbos and Shemitta, we also remind ourselves that the whole idea of Shemitta teaches us the significance of knowing that there are limitations and guidelines, that there's assays and los assays, there are things we ought to be doing, things that we need to remove ourselves from. And those lot assays are giving us a framework by which we can appreciate what HaKadosh Baruch Hu is giving us and the allowances that we have. And while it's important that Shemitta is focused on both of our those elements of emunah with HaKadosh Baruch Hu and understanding that we're commanded by HaKadosh Baruch Hu on one hand, and reminding ourselves that the limitations that Torah gives us is supposed to take us away from overindulgence or not realizing who's really in control, there's also an interaction with other human beings that Shemitta reminds us about as well. As the Moreh Nevuchim points out, the Rambam points out in the Moreh Nevuchim, there's a social element here as well in Shemitta, tied to the idea that we have to free other people, for example, from their loans and things like that during Shemitta. There is this element of other individuals, allowing them to have interaction with, whether it's with our land or the things that grow from our land, not to feel like we're in ownership of this space and no one else is allowed, and not to kind of, in some ways, open that playing field for other people to interact with and to participate. That's another element of what Shemitta reminds us on a social interaction, ben adam lechaveiro. We know that during this time period, specifically Sfiras HaOmer, as we're leading towards Lag BaOmer, Dafka right now, when we're reading this parsha, we're reminded of those who were not noei kavod zeh bazeh. Unfortunately, they didn't have proper respect for each other, and unfortunately, many Talmidim of Rabbi Akiva didn't listen to him when he said zeh klal gadol b'Torah for v'ahavta l'reach chamocha. And Shemitta reminds us how to interact with other people as well. That we're not here to take advantage of other people, which is another mitzvah that comes up in our parsha, and we're not here to exploit other people or to exploit our dominance of other people because we happen to own this land and it's all ours. We're here to share, and we're here to provide to others that are in need, and we're here to re-engage with community in general. And Shemitta and Shabbos allows us to do that as well. As we mentioned earlier, Shabbos gives us the opportunity to re-engage with our family and with friends, to refocus our attention on our relationships, and that's another area of Ma'inyan Shemitta Eitzel Har Sinai. Of course, we need Shemitta to remind us of all of these elements, taking a break to reflect, to think about our emunah b'Hashem, to know that everything in our lives comes from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to remind us that limitations are there as guidelines and support for our interaction with this world, not the opposite, and to remind us that our interactions with other human beings, ben adam lechaveiro, are a top priority, and Shemitta allows us the opportunity to do so. So yes, Ma'inyan Shemitta Eitzel Har Sinai, it seems like it's an interesting combination of topics right at the beginning of our parsha, but when one thinks about the elements of what Shemitta provides for us and for us to be thinking about, and especially as right now we're going to Kabbalas HaTorah and we're counting Sfiras HaOmer, 7 sevens, we are here to remind ourselves of the importance of Shemitta, of the importance of reflection, of the importance of preparing appropriately, especially as we're getting to Kabbalas HaTorah. All of that are lessons of Shemitta and more, and it's an opportunity for us to think about that Dafka this Shabbos when we're thinking about Shemitta, and Dafka right now as we're heading to Kabbalas HaTorah. Everyone have a wonderful Shabbos.